Okay, this is the female reproductive system, and the big thing they always ask is that the gonad for the organ, is the ovary, and what's made there is an ova or an egg. So eggs are made in the ovaries, and again, they are made by that meiosis from last unit. Remember, meiosis makes the sex cells are eggs are made in the ovaries. All right. So that's a big thing to know. There are some different hormones. Estrogen's the one you've always heard of, progesterone during pregnancy. Sometimes those are the two that are in like birth controls. You might have heard of them there. Then there's these other two hormones that men also have. We do, if we were in class, we would get into the details, but we won't, because what you really need to know is that just this whole process is controlled by hormones. All right.
Excuse me, Mom.
Mommy's making a video right now, honey.
Yes.
So what do these hormones do? They regulate the egg production, the menstrual cycle, the pregnancy, and those secondary sex characteristics that we talked about with the males too, like body hair, breast development, and menstruation being unique to women. All right, probably not something that's on the regions, but good to know. And then this diagram also is generally not on the regions, but it's really good to know, right? You don't want to graduate high school not knowing which is the rectum and which is the bladder and which is the vagina, right? So there are 3 openings in a female. The one that's the furthest the back, right? Like this is the butt. The one that's furthest back, that is the rectum, right? That's where poop comes out. Lovely. And then there's a uterus and a bladder. And people tend to get those mixed up and they mislabel them. So the way I remember it is the uterus is on top, okay? And the way I remember that is when I was pregnant, I always had to pee. Why did I always have to pee? Because here's a little baby. There is a little baby sitting inside her uterus right on top of your bladder. Okay, so that's how I always remember that the uterus is kind of on top of the bladder. So that's the bladder, colored yellow because it contains urine. The urethra is where the pee comes out, but it's not where like the sex happens for the female. Sex and the baby being born is here in the vagina. So the sex happens here and the baby comes out here. And then the rectum is just for bowel movements would be the correct word for that. All right. On to the next. So the whole point of all of this is for eggs to be made, right? So we have egg production. Remember, we call the egg an ova. So when eggs are released, we call it ovulation, right? And we would not be able to make babies if we didn't have ovulation, because ovulation is the releasing of the egg. So they usually show a picture like this, and it's basically just showing like first this happens, then this, then this, then this, and this. And it's basically like the egg develops, and it gets bigger, then it matures, then it kind of attaches to the wall like we saw in exocytosis, and it's like this little sac that's holding the egg gets bigger and bigger, and then the egg gets shot out. All right, and that's ovulation. Right. So some women that are trying to get pregnant are going to like try to plan around like what day are they ovulating? Like, am I ovulating on day 14 or 15? So they will try to have sex on that day so that they can get pregnant. Other women, younger women might be trying to not get pregnant. So they might be trying to not have sex on that particular day. So they might like track their ovulation to make sure that they don't have sex on that day. So I have this really funny joke. What do you call people that use like ovulation tracking as a way to avoid pregnancy? And the answer is you call them parents. Get it? Because if you do this technique, you'll end up having a baby. And the reason is, the reason is that women can ovulate at all different days. The average is day 14, but it can be totally different for different women. And for the same woman, it could be different days. Like some women, 1 month might ovulate day 14, the next month might be day 5. So it's really not a good way to avoid pregnancy. But it is what some people do to try to get pregnant, to at least increase their odds by having sex on the day that this little egg is released right there. And that's called ovulation, when the egg is released. Oops. Okay. So in the next unit, we will talk about this whole cycle about how that egg like develops and is released. And that's called the menstrual cycle. All right.